Okay, in this lesson we're going to talk about using stronger color to create more interest in your painting or to draw your eye to a certain area, because we can use muted color and have one area where we're going to use stronger color to make that the focal point or to draw the viewer's attention. So we also want to talk about composition here and value. I also want to talk about color and look at a few paintings as well. So this first image here, this is in Pecos, New Mexico. All those little towns along the Rio Grande and in northern New Mexico going up to Colorado are really nice, interesting places to paint. Now I'm going to crop it. Could have a lot of different focal points here. I could decide I want the building over here, that kind of a shadow and sunlight. That area is kind of a focal point. I mean, that would make a painting by itself, but including a little bit of that and moving over here. And I could make this more of a square, make it a long rectangle or long horizontal. There's a lot here to kind of work with, but I'm going to choose a little bit of the building here, not the whole building, and focus more on the horses and the orange adobe house here. And that's what drew me to this photograph, was the idea of that strong contrast of the house and the horses and the dark trees and the hill in the background. These very light, very strong color, and then the surrounding shapes are a lot darker. And I don't mind the horses over here. Could move them in just a hair so they're not as close to the edge. But the house itself is real strong. That might even be my focal point and not the horses. So first thing here, getting just some stronger color in the trees and on the building. The roof on that building is too white, it just goes chalky. So making it a bit warmer, a hair darker. Doesn't have to be real strong in color, because I got the strong color down here in the front of the building and on the shadow side. I started on that shadow side with a strong violet and then scrubbed in the local color of a slightly darker orange, which is the local color of the building. Local color being the local color of the object, like red apple, green tree, red barn. Here it's orange. So I want a little bit of that orange, darker version scrubbed into that violet. And then stronger on these trees. We got sunlight here, so I can push this pretty light, but don't go chalky. Too much white will really kill the color and kind of kill the whole painting. So simple, dark and light with a little bit stronger color. And then lastly, stronger color in the background. And again, I used a very strong violet. This would be dioxazine purple. But there's still that green underneath kind of coming through, because I don't have this real opaque. So it's violet muted with a little bit of muted green. And that creates kind of a nice violet in the trees in the background. And I wouldn't necessarily mix them both on the palette, because you can mix things like that flat and they really get just too gray. But if I put the violet down first, or the green, and then add the other on top, they kind of blend together a little bit. Some of the violet will show through, some of the muted green will show through, and give you a little bit more color variation. But when you mix values together on the palette, generally they're mixed flat. In other words, you mix one flat value in color. And that works a lot of times, but sometimes with colors that are going to create kind of a grayish color, it becomes too gray. So mix them on the canvas. And usually in my paintings, I'm doing about half and half, or maybe 60% of my mixtures are on the palette and 40% are right on the canvas. It just creates more of a stronger color. Popping the greens a bit more and a little bit stronger orange there. So that gives a more effective color usage. There's still a lot of gray on the real muted blue-violet on the roof and some muted colors in the shadows. But trying to push them strong really makes a difference. It's more about practicing and seeing what stronger color will do. You'll do some where the color's way too strong, and then you'll back off and you'll get it too gray. But eventually you kind of learn enough from both ends to see what the middle looks like. Middle being good use of strong color and some muted color. Also, pushing values a bit more. If I came in here and added some darker darks, the building would become pretty soon more important than the horses. little red curtain in there. And that draws my attention more because that's where the strongest color is, the darkest dark, close to the lightest light. And that draws the attention away from the horses a little bit. And this is in Hillsboro, New Mexico. I'm always going along the Rio Grande, and all those little mining towns and farming villages are great places to paint. Now, cropping this obviously a lot, I want it tall enough that I can get some of the dark trees up there, but I don't want to get it too bottom heavy. The house down at the bottom, I could even crop it a bit more. Let's do that. I don't think I quite need that much tree, of that big tree. Takes away from the building here. And of course, what attracts me to this is the sunlight, the shadow from the tree, sunlight, the dappled light on the house and on the road here in front, which I could do more of. I do want to get rid of things that just aren't going to help the composition at all. And this thing doesn't. I'd maybe arrange the rocks a little bit differently. First thing I do is punch the focal point, the cast shadow on the building, real strong violet. Because again, I'm going to come back and add some of the local color right on the canvas. So I should have done more layers here, but you can see I came back with some red orange, about the same value or slightly lighter than the violet. But that really affects that violet. The violet makes it dark and cool, if I get the right value. Looks like shadow, and then the local color ties it into the sunlit orange, which I popped a little bit stronger. Same thing with the roof, a little stronger color. Use somewhat the same color, maybe a bit more of a bluish green, a viridian in there. Pushing that color a little stronger. Same thing with the background. The hill back there is just a bit too straight across. Same, real parallel to the straight line on the roof. So I want to offset that by making the mountain a bit more of an angled line than straight across. And darkening the darks in the trees. The darks in the shadow here on the house are going to have more two values. Tree would too, but I want a dark here that's dark enough to really read as shadow, but not so dark that I can't get some darker accents in there. So I have two values in there. And then the dappled light on the bottom. I didn't add anything to this shadow. I could come back and add a little bit again of kind of a muted orange in there, but I kind of like the stronger blue of that shadow. And eliminating the shrubbery here and just getting some contrast of just dark and light suggestion of rocks in there. But really punching that color. And in this case, a lot of strong color in the shadows because there's so many large shadows. The bigger shadows get, the lighter they get, and the more color is in them. You still have to keep them dark enough so that you have the contrast between the light and the dark. But a lot of color in there. Now, looking at a couple of paintings, this is a painting by Aldro Hibbard, and you can see how strong this color is here, how strong that is there. But you can also see, because I'm using a real strong red, that his red is slightly muted, probably has a bit of that green in it. Same thing with the green. You can see he probably has a bit of this red in that green, so he mutes it, but it still reads real strong. I mean, that's a real strong color, even though it is muted. And I like these spots of pretty strong color in here. In other words, they don't have a lot of the complement in it. Then he also has a lot of color that are very grayed. Some gray color. And by gray, I mean it almost goes kind of neutral. Some of the violets back in here are a bit more neutral. Some of the browns in here kind of muted some. And those work together, the stronger colors, the grayer colors, to create a good balance. This is fairly neutral in there. So he does mute everything at least slightly and mutes other colors a lot. And that leaves him a lot of room to come back with real strong colors, especially in the water here. You can see, even though again it's slightly muted, not very much. That's pretty strong back in there, strong violet there. So a good series of strong colors and then more muted colors and then kind of gray colors. Wouldn't work as well, I don't think, without pushing some of those colors a bit stronger maybe than what he saw. Now here's a painting by T.C. Steele. He was an American painter. And I really like this painting. Very moody, very atmospheric, but not colorful at all. And his goal here isn't to push the color. It has a nice feel to it. just with that limited muted palette that he's using, and of course muted colors in the painting. You can see how important value is, because the color, while it contributes a lot, especially down here in the greens, it's not that much different than if I were to make it a black and white. Obviously the use of the warm greens, warm light greens, really makes a difference, but it still has kind of the same effect, whether it's color or black and white. But a real nice feel, thinking more value here. This is another one of TC Steels. Obviously using a lot more color here. A lot stronger. The yellows, the red oranges, the violets, really strong. And it's offset by the grayer sky, some of the grays in the road and in the tree and in the roof. But a good combination of real strong color. I mean, it doesn't look like a photograph at all. He's not copying a photograph. This is another one. And here he is really pushing the color. You can see the difference between that painting and this painting. Same artist. And I'm assuming at different times. This is probably early career. And this is later, where he's just throwing paint around like crazy. You can see how strong color really makes a strong impact. And he has a lot of vibration from the blue to the orange. Those complementary colors next to each other, and the warm and the cool really create a strong vibration of color. This is another Aldril Hibbard, the red boat. Now he's got a red barn. But that really is real effective, getting both the shadow and the sunlight there. Very strong. Of course, it has compositionally these shadows just really pointing to it. And some stronger colors spotted around, but reds up here very muted. Reds and violets of the trees. A lot of muted color, which offsets the real strong barn. So keeping everything slightly muted, and one thing just really real strong. Here's a good example of mixing right on the canvas. Maybe starting with a fairly clean blue violet, scrubbing in kind of a red violet, some orange, yellow orange. A lot of color in there. And that's from reflected light. Reflected light from the sky, from the sun, bouncing back in there and really picking up. It's from here. The light hitting here and bouncing back into these light areas on the snow. Snow really picking up that reflected light from the barn. Really think through the color. This is William Lathrop, another American Impressionist. And if you look at this painting, and I really like the real muted, kind of close color, strong value painting. But there's not much color. There's kind of a light warm and then a dark warm. Might be just black, yellow ochre, and burnt sienna. Very limited. But the minute I pop a color in here, a little more orange, that really stands out. It's real effective because everything else is very muted. If I put a little bit of muted color in there, same value, then it becomes even more effective because that gray kind of ties in with it, knocks it down. And I do want to mute everything always a little bit. I don't want it so strong that it just jumps out of the canvas. As you can see, if I use a limited palette and get everything blocked in, then I can find an area where I want to use a little bit stronger color to make that area pop out a bit more. And all these colors are slightly muted, but they're strong enough that they really make things pop. And if I did the same thing in the grass a little bit, lightly scrubbing in or glazing over, you can see the color starts to really make a difference. But it only makes a difference because everything else is so muted. So using a limited palette of 3, maybe 4 colors that are somewhat muted, even an earth palette of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and yellow ochre, and get things blocked in, and then come back and add some stronger color where you want it, is very, very effective.